My name is Ren, and I just turned 28. Yesterday, my mother decided to block my grandmother's phone number completely. Apparently, reaching out for assistance with prescription expenses automatically transforms you into an unwanted obligation. My Aunt Marlene had the audacity to type in our family group chat that she had already exceeded her expected lifespan. Where are you tuning in from right now? Let me know your location down in the comments and make sure you smash that like button and subscribe. If you have ever experienced being treated like the family outcast, you will absolutely want to stay for what unfolded next. Allow me to bring you back to the beginning of this whole situation. Understanding my relatives requires grasping one fundamental reality. My existence was never part of anyone's plan. My mother, Corinne, had barely turned 19 when she discovered she was expecting me. Freshly graduated from high school, involved with a young man her parents despised, and utterly unprepared for parenthood. To phrase it gently, I represented an inconvenience. While other children grew up hearing heartwarming tales about how desperately their parents wished for them, I grew up with the constant awareness that I was an error. Not the type of error parents eventually embrace with cheerful surprise baby anecdotes. The type of error that derails ambitions, destroys futures, and generates resentment that never truly dissipates. Because nothing communicates unconditional love quite like perpetually being reminded you destroyed someone's life trajectory. Correct? When I reached 4 years old, my mother encountered Prescott. Prescott embodied everything my biological father lacked. Steady, gainfully employed, respectable. He expressed interest in marrying my mother, but his proposal came with stipulations. He was prepared to accept a woman with history, but he had zero interest in raising another man's offspring. So my mother arrived at a decision. She selected her future over her daughter. Astonishing, I realize. I can still recall the day she filled my tiny pink luggage. She informed me I would be staying with Grandma Opal temporarily, just until circumstances stabilized. That temporary arrangement transformed into permanence. By my 5th birthday, my mother had wed Prescott, relocated to an attractive subdivision 35 miles away, and commenced building her authentic family. First arrived my half-brother Garrison, then my half-sister Briar 2 years afterward. To be equitable, my mother did not completely desert me. She appeared occasionally, typically around holidays or special occasions, bearing expensive presents that resembled guilt payments more than genuine expressions of affection. She would capture photographs of us together, proof for her acquaintances that she remained a devoted mother to her firstborn. But then she would depart again, returning to her flawless family where I simply did not belong. Must be wonderful having relatives you can just pop in on whenever it suits your schedule. My grandmother, Opal, became my entire universe. She had reached 53 when I moved in permanently, a widow who had been anticipating enjoying her independence. Instead, she received a traumatized 4-year-old plagued by nightmares about abandonment. Talk about receiving the worst possible outcome. But here is the remarkable thing about Grandma Opal. She never once caused me to feel like an encumbrance. When I questioned why Mommy no longer desired me, she seated me in her kitchen, prepared hot chocolate for both of us, and explained, "Sometimes individuals make choices that seem incomprehensible to everyone else, darling. But you are precisely where you belong." She labored extra shifts at the neighborhood restaurant to cover expenses like ballet lessons and educational supplies. When other youngsters had parents attending school functions, Grandma Opal appeared in her server uniform, applauding more enthusiastically than anyone present. She assisted with my assignments despite having only completed 8th grade herself, and she read stories to me every single evening until I became old enough to find it embarrassing. The remainder of my mother's relatives regarded me as evidence of her poor decisions. They maintained sufficient politeness, but an underlying message always persisted. You do not genuinely belong among us. At family celebrations, I remained the child seated at the younger generation's table long after my cousins had advanced to sit with the adults. I was the one they neglected to include in group photographs, the afterthought when organizing family vacations. Because nothing cultivates self-worth quite like consistently being treated as an optional relative. My Aunt Marlene, my mother's sister, demonstrated particular skill at causing me to feel unwelcome. She possessed this manner of inquiring about my mother with artificial sympathy. "How is Corinne managing? It must be tremendously difficult for her, having to worry about you on top of everything else." The suggestion remained perpetually evident. I represented a complication requiring management, an obstacle in my mother's otherwise thriving existence. But Grandma Opal perceived me differently. To her, I was not a mistake or a burden. I was her granddaughter. Full stop. She celebrated every minor accomplishment as though it constituted a major triumph. When I achieved honor roll status, she displayed the certificate on the refrigerator and kept it there for 2 years. When I received college acceptance with partial scholarship funding, she wept joyful tears and treated me to the most expensive meal we could manage. She never possessed substantial wealth, but she offered boundless love and an unshakable conviction in my value. When I questioned myself, which occurred frequently given how the rest of the family regarded me, she would remind me of everything I had already conquered. "You possess more strength than you recognize, Ren. You have been demonstrating that since age 4. That resilience she observed in me. I was about to require every ounce of it." By the time I completed my degree, the family dynamics had settled into a predictable rhythm. My mother sustained just enough communication to avoid appearing like a complete abandoner, but never sufficient to actually construct a relationship. She would mail holiday cards containing generic sentiments and occasionally react to my social media posts, but she never telephoned simply to check on my well-being. Because why would you desire actual conversation with your firstborn daughter when you could simply click a thumbs-up icon on her life updates? Garrison and Briar, my half-siblings, matured knowing about me, but not truly knowing me. To them, I resembled more of a distant relative who materialized at significant family occasions, present but not genuinely part of the inner circle. They demonstrated politeness during our interactions, but an invisible barrier always existed. They had grown up under the same roof, shared inside references, and possessed memories I was excluded from. I was the sister with a disclaimer, the "oh right, Corinne has another daughter" footnote in their family narrative. Meanwhile, Grandma Opal aged gracefully but stubbornly. Even as she entered her 70s, she refused to decelerate. She continued working at the restaurant until 75, claiming she required something to occupy her time. The reality was she still harbored concerns about finances, specifically about maintaining enough reserves to assist me if necessary. Because that is what you do when you genuinely love someone. You concern yourself with their future, even when you can barely manage your own present. When I secured my first legitimate position after graduation, working at a communications firm in the metropolitan area, Grandma Opal displayed more pride than any parent has ever exhibited. She preserved every article I composed, every campaign I contributed to, despite not truly comprehending what digital communications entailed. My granddaughter works in advertising. She would announce to anyone willing to listen, as though I commanded a major agency, instead of coordinating social media accounts for small enterprises. I relocated to an apartment nearer to my workplace, approximately an hour's distance from Grandma Opal's residence. It represented the greatest distance I had ever resided from her, and we both experienced the separation. We conversed by telephone every other day, sometimes more frequently if something noteworthy occurred, or if she worried about my vegetable consumption, you understand, typical grandparent concerns. Unlike my actual parents who could not be troubled to verify I still drew breath. She never quite comprehended my generation's approach to relationships and careers. When I informed her I was concentrating on establishing my career before settling down, she would nod supportively, but I could detect the worry in her expression. She wanted me to discover someone who would love me the way she did unconditionally and completely. "You deserve someone who recognizes how exceptional you are," she would say during our Sunday telephone conversations. "Never accept anything less than that." The irony did not escape me. The woman who had demonstrated what unconditional love resembled was also the one encouraging me not to settle for inferior treatment. While the relatives who should have loved me unconditionally regarded me like an obligation they could not quite eliminate. During this period, the extended family had established a group message that included everyone except Grandma Opal and myself. I only discovered its existence when my cousin Sutton accidentally added me to a thread discussing Christmas arrangements. The message that appeared made it evident they had been coordinating family events without us for months. Because nothing expresses family unity quite like secretly organizing gatherings that exclude the individuals who most need inclusion. When I mentioned it to Grandma Opal, she merely shrugged. They can maintain their exclusive club, darling. We do not require their validation to constitute a family. But I could perceive it wounded her more deeply than she admitted. These were her children and grandchildren, and they were systematically excluding her from family discussions. She had raised them, supported them through their own difficulties, and now that she had aged and potentially needed more assistance, they were withdrawing. That moment prompted me to observe the family dynamics more carefully. During holiday gatherings, I noticed how rapidly conversations ceased when Grandma Opal entered a room. I witnessed them formulating plans for group activities, but somehow neglecting to mention them to her until it became too late for her participation. It resembled observing an advanced course in passive-aggressive exclusion. The most painful aspect was watching her pretend not to notice. She would smile and nod along when they discussed trips they had taken or restaurants they had sampled, never acknowledging that she had not received invitations. She preserved her dignity, even as her own children treated her like an obligation, because that is what a lifetime of prioritizing other people's feelings before your own teaches you. You become an expert at swallowing your own suffering with a smile. It infuriated me, but Grandma Opal always advised patience. People become absorbed in their own existences, she would explain. They do not intend to cause harm. I was not so generous in my assessment. These were adults who had benefited from her sacrifices for decades, and now that she required them to step forward, they were discovering excuses to step backward. Revolutionary concept. Perhaps when someone dedicates their entire existence to caring for you, you could reciprocate when they grow older. The shift became more apparent as Grandma Opal reached her mid-70s. Her arthritis made operating a vehicle over long distances more challenging, so she attended fewer family gatherings. Instead of offering to transport her or planning events closer to her home, the relatives simply ceased expecting her attendance. When she mentioned this to my Aunt Marlene, the response was revealing. "Mom, you understand how occupied everyone is. It is simply more convenient this way." More convenient for whom? Certainly not for the woman who had spent decades making everything convenient for everyone else. I began visiting Grandma Opal more frequently, driving to her house every weekend instead of every other week. We would prepare meals together, watch her favorite television programs, and work in her garden. She moved more slowly than previously, but her mind remained sharp as ever, and her sense of humor had not diminished whatsoever. "Do you know what occurred to me recently?" she said, while we were planting vegetables one Saturday afternoon. "I spent so many years concerned about becoming a burden on my children that I forgot to expect them to behave like family." That observation remained with me long after I drove home that evening. It was the first crack in her customarily optimistic armor, the first acknowledgement that perhaps her children's behavior was not as innocent as she had been pretending. I should have recognized then that worse circumstances were approaching. The family group text was established on a Tuesday in October. I know this because my cousin Sutton, clearly the technological coordinator of the family, accidentally included me in the initial setup message before quickly removing me and sending a private apology text. Sorry, that was intended for the family group. The family group as if I was not family. But at least they were being transparent about how they perceived me for once. I captured that message on my screen, not from pettiness, but because it perfectly captured how they viewed me. I was family adjacent, family when convenient, excluded when it simplified their lives. What I did not realize at the time was that Grandma Opal had not been included either, because apparently being the woman who birthed and raised half these people does not automatically qualify you for the inner circle. For months, I observed from the outside as my extended family became increasingly coordinated in ways that did not include us. Birthday celebrations I learned about afterward. Thanksgiving plans that somehow got forgotten to be communicated to both of us. Christmas gift exchanges that we were not informed about until someone posted photographs online. The exclusion was systematic, but maintained plausible deniability. "Oh, we assumed someone else had informed you. We figured you would be too occupied to attend anyway. We organized it so last minute. We did not want to pressure you. Standard procedure for people who want to be cruel while maintaining the moral high ground. Grandma Opal handled it with her usual grace, at least publicly. She never complained or demanded explanations. When she discovered events after they occurred, she would simply smile and say something like, "Well, it sounds like everyone had a wonderful time." Because that is what a lifetime of prioritizing other people's feelings first teaches you, how to swallow your own disappointment with a smile. But I began noticing subtle changes in her behavior. She was eating less, sleeping more, and that characteristic cheerfulness seemed slightly forced. When I asked if everything was okay, she would insist she was fine, but I could see through the facade. It is remarkable how quickly you can identify fake happiness when you have been performing it yourself for most of your existence. The reality was being systematically excluded by your own children takes a toll, regardless of your strength. In December, circumstances escalated. My mother posted a series of photographs from what appeared to be an elaborate family celebration. Multiple generations, everyone formally dressed. Clearly some type of significant occasion. Garrison had gotten engaged, and they had organized a surprise engagement party for everyone except Grandma Opal and me. Because nothing says surprise quite like ensuring the guest list excludes the people who genuinely care about your happiness. When I telephoned Grandma Opal to ask if she had known about it, there was a lengthy pause before she responded. "I saw the photographs on social media," she said quietly. "It looked lovely. Did anyone inform you beforehand?" Another pause. "Your mother said they wanted to keep it small and intimate." Small and intimate. 15 family members, but not the woman who had raised half of them. Interesting definition of intimate. That night, I lay awake contemplating the casual cruelty of everything. These were not strangers or distant acquaintances. These were people who had eaten Grandma Opal's cooking, slept in her house, borrowed her money, and relied on her free childcare for decades. And now, when she was in her late 70s and needed inclusion most, they were systematically pushing her to the margins. I decided to telephone my mother directly. Time for some uncomfortable truths. "Ren." "Hi, sweetheart," she answered, her voice artificially bright. "Did you see Garrison's photographs? Is not Rosalind's ring beautiful?" "Her name is Rosalind." "Mom, Garrison is engaged to Rosalind." The fact that my mother could not even remember her future daughter-in-law's name correctly was revealing. And yes, the photographs looked lovely. I am just wondering why Grandma Opal and I were not invited. Silence then. "Well, it was very last minute, and we knew you both had busy schedules. It was a surprise party, Mom. By definition, the guests do not know about it in advance. And Grandma Opal does not exactly have a packed social calendar, unless watching television programs and worrying about her medication costs counts as living it up." More silence. I could practically hear her scrambling for an excuse that did not make her sound like a terrible daughter and mother. "It is complicated, Ren. There are family dynamics you do not understand." Family dynamics. That was rich coming from the woman who had literally given me away to avoid complications in her own existence. "Try me," I said. "I am pretty good at understanding family dynamics, considering I have been navigating the complicated ones in our family for 24 years. She sighed, clearly irritated that I was not letting this drop. "If you must know, some people felt it would be less stressful if we kept the guest list to immediate family. Some people. Never any names. Always some nebulous people making these decisions. How convenient to never take personal responsibility for your choices. And Grandma Opal is not immediate family? You know what I mean, Ren. But I did know what she meant, and that was the problem. In their minds, Grandma Opal had been demoted from matriarch to obligation. She was no longer someone whose presence enhanced their gatherings. She was someone whose needs complicated their logistics. After I disconnected, I drove straight to Grandma Opal's house. I found her in her living room, examining a photo album of family pictures from when my mother and Aunt Marlene were young. "They used to include me in everything," she said, without looking up when I sat down beside her. "I was the one who hosted every holiday, every birthday, every celebration. Now I discover them on social media like a stranger." It was the most honest thing she had said about the situation, and hearing the hurt in her voice made my chest constrict with anger. "They do not deserve you," I said. She looked up then, her eyes watery, but her voice steady. "They are still my children, Ren. I do not know how to stop loving them, even when they act like I am invisible." That moment made me realize just how profound this rejection went. It was not merely about missed parties or forgotten invitations. They were erasing her from their lives while she was still alive, treating her like she had already departed. I had no concept of how much worse circumstances were about to become. The message arrived on a Thursday morning while I was in a client meeting. My phone vibrated against the conference table, and I glanced down to see a notification from a group text I did not recognize. When the meeting concluded, I checked my phone properly. I had been added to the family group text finally, but as I read through the message history, my excitement quickly transformed to confusion, then horror, because apparently my inclusion was not about newfound family affection. It was about witnessing a masterclass in casual cruelty. The first message was from Grandma Opal, sent at 6:47 in the morning. "Good morning, everyone. I hate to ask, but I am having difficulty affording my medications this month. The insurance is not covering as much as it used to, and I am about $200 short. Could anyone help me out? I can repay it gradually." It was such a simple, humble request. $200 for medication from a woman who had spent decades helping everyone else financially whenever they required it. You know, back when she was useful to them. The next message was from my Aunt Marlene, sent 20 minutes later. "Mom, have you tried asking the pharmacy about payment plans?" Then my mother. "There are programs for seniors, Mom. Maybe look into those." My cousin Sutton. "Could you maybe skip the non-essential medications for now? Skip the non-essential medications." As if any medication prescribed to a 77-year-old woman was non-essential. Correct? Let us just play Russian roulette with Grandma's health because asking relatives for help is such an inconvenience. I continued reading, feeling more nauseated with each message. Person after person, offering advice, suggestions, anything except actual assistance. They were treating her request like it was an annoyance, a problem to be resolved with minimal effort on their part, like she was asking them to donate a kidney instead of the cost of a decent dinner out. Then came the message that made my hands tremble with rage. Aunt Marlene. Honestly, at her age, how much longer does she really need these medications anyway? She has already lived longer than most people. I stared at that message until my eyes burned. This was my grandmother they were discussing. The woman who had raised their children when they needed babysitting, who had loaned them money for vehicles and down payments, who had never missed a birthday or holiday despite being systematically excluded from family planning. And their response to her asking for help with medication was to suggest that maybe she did not need to continue living much longer anyway. Because nothing says family values like questioning whether your elderly mother deserves to remain alive. The group went quiet after that message. I waited, hoping someone would push back, tell Marlene that was a horrible thing to say. But the silence stretched on. Apparently, no one found her comment objectionable enough to challenge. Or maybe they all agreed and just did not want to say it aloud. Finally, around lunchtime, there was another message from Grandma Opal. "Never mind, everyone. I will figure something out. Sorry to bother you all. Sorry to bother them." She was apologizing for needing help to stay alive, for having the audacity to think her own children might care whether she could afford the medications keeping her heart beating. I captured every single message in that thread before responding. When dealing with people this callous, documentation is important. Plus, I had a feeling these messages might prove useful later. My message was simple. "Grandma Opal, do not worry about it. I will take care of the medication costs. Can you call me this evening?" The response was immediate. Suddenly, everyone had opinions. Remarkable how quickly they developed voices when someone else was stepping up to do what they would not. Marlene. Ren, you do not need to do that. Mom can handle her own expenses. Mom. Sweetie, we were just trying to help her find sustainable solutions. Sutton. She is probably exaggerating how much she needs anyway. The backpedaling was almost as disgusting as the original messages. Now that someone was actually offering to help, they wanted to minimize the problem and make it seem like I was overreacting because heaven forbid they look like the heartless children they actually were. I typed and deleted several responses. each one more scathing than the last. Finally, I settled on something that would make my position crystal clear, without giving them ammunition to use against me later. I am happy to help my grandmother with whatever she needs. That is what family does for each other. The emphasis on family was intentional. Let them choke on the implication. But I was not finished. I telephoned Grandma Opal immediately. "Honey, you do not have to worry about my medications," she said as soon as she answered. I was probably being dramatic. These old bones do not need as much maintenance as I thought. "Grandma, stop." My voice was sharper than I intended. "You were not being dramatic. You asked your family for help with a basic need, and they treated you like a burden. That is not acceptable. They are busy, Ren. Everyone has their own. They are not too busy to plan elaborate parties and post about them on social media. They are not too busy to coordinate group texts and family activities. They are only too busy when you need something from them. Funny how selective their busy schedules are." She was quiet for a long moment, then in a voice smaller than I had ever heard from her. "I know." That admission broke my heart. She had been protecting their reputations, even to me, pretending their neglect was innocent oversight instead of deliberate cruelty. Because that is what good mothers do. They protect their children's images even when those children are destroying them. "I am coming to see you this weekend," I said. "We are going to the pharmacy together, and we are going to make sure you have everything you need. And Grandma, you are never going to apologize for needing help again." After we disconnected, I sat in my car outside the office building, trembling with fury. These people had spent decades benefiting from her generosity, and the moment she needed something in return, they tried to make her feel guilty for asking. Well, I had news for them. Some family members actually show up when it matters. I just had no idea how much this simple act of decency was about to change everything. That weekend, I drove to Grandma Opal's house with a car full of groceries and a mind full of anger I was trying to keep under control. She deserved my support, not my rage, even though the rage was entirely on her behalf. I found her in her kitchen making tea with hands that shook slightly, whether from age or emotion, I could not tell. "You did not have to come all this way," she said. But her relief at seeing me was obvious. Yes, I did. I started unpacking groceries, including several bags from the pharmacy. "I picked up your medications, all of them, for the next 3 months." Her eyes filled with tears. "Ren, that is too much. I cannot let you. You can, and you will." I sat down across from her at the small kitchen table where she had helped me with homework for years. "Grandma, can I ask you something honestly?" She nodded. "How long has it been since any of them actually helped you with anything?" She thought for a moment, stirring her tea absently. "Your mother brought me a casserole when I had that cold last winter." "A casserole? When you were sick? What about anything significant? Because apparently one casserole is supposed to compensate for a lifetime of taking care of everyone else." Another long pause. "I suppose it has been a while since they have needed to help me with much." "Because you have been handling everything yourself, have you not? Even when it was getting harder." She did not answer, but the truth was written all over her face. She had been struggling financially for months, maybe longer, trying to maintain her independence while her own children congratulated themselves for their busy lives. "Can I see that group text again?" I asked gently. Reluctantly, she showed me her phone. I read through the messages again, my anger building with each dismissive response. But it was the message I had missed that really affected me. The one that came after Aunt Marlene's comment about Grandma Opal having lived long enough. My cousin Thatcher, Marlene's son, had written, "Maybe it is time to start thinking about other options for Grandma. Assisted living places handle all this medication stuff. Other options." They were not just dismissing her current needs. They were already planning to ship her off to a facility, so they would not have to deal with her aging at all. Because nothing says loving family quite like planning to warehouse your elderly grandmother, because her needs are inconvenient. "Did you see Thatcher's message about assisted living?" I asked. Grandma Opal's face tightened. "I saw it. Is that something you want?" "What I want does not seem particularly relevant to anyone anymore," she said, with more bitterness than I had ever heard from her. That evening, we sat on her front porch watching the sunset. something we had done countless times when I was younger. The silence between us was comfortable, but I could feel her sadness like a weight in the air. "I keep wondering where I went wrong with them," she finally said. "I thought I raised them to be kind people." "You did raise them to be kind. They are choosing not to be. But why? What did I do to make them think so little of me?" The question hung between us, unanswerable and heartbreaking, because the truth was, she had not done anything wrong. She had loved them, supported them, sacrificed for them, and now they were repaying that love with neglect and resentment. Revolutionary concept. Maybe the problem is not with the person who gave everything, but with the people who took it all for granted. "You did not do anything," I said firmly. "Some people just get uncomfortable when the person who used to take care of them starts needing care themselves. It forces them to grow up, and they are not ready for that responsibility." She nodded slowly. "I never wanted to be a burden. Needing help does not make you a burden, Grandma. It makes you human." That night, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling and making plans. Not revenge plans. I am not that dramatic. But practical plans. Grandma Opal needed an advocate. Someone who would show up when she needed help. Someone who would not treat her like an inconvenience. Since her own children had abdicated that responsibility, it fell to me. And honestly, I was honored to step up where they had stepped down. The next morning, I made a decision that would change both our lives, though I had no way of knowing it at the time. "I'm going to start coming here every weekend," I announced over breakfast. "And I am going to set up automatic payments for your medications, utilities, and groceries. Consider it a family support system. Honey, you cannot afford to take care of both of us. You have your own life to build. My life includes you, Grandma. It always has. Because that is how real family works. You do not abandon people when they need you most." She cried then, quietly but steadily, and I knew they were tears of relief as much as gratitude. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was my mother, and her tone was decidedly cold. "Ren, we need to talk about this situation with your grandmother." "What situation would that be, Mom?" "This financial arrangement you have made with her. It is sending the wrong message to everyone." "What message would that be?" "That the rest of us do not care about her." I could not help myself. I laughed. "Mom, the rest of you do not care about her. You literally suggested she might not need her medications because she has lived long enough. That is not what Marlene meant, and you know it." "Then what did she mean?" "Because I am genuinely curious how else you interpret suggesting someone has lived long enough when they ask for help staying alive." Silence. Because there was no other way to interpret that comment, and we both knew it. "Look," my mother continued, "we appreciate that you want to help, but you are making the rest of us look bad." And there it was. The truth. They did not care that Grandma Opal was struggling. They cared that my helping her highlighted their neglect. It was not about her well-being. It was about their reputation. "Good," I said simply. "You should look bad because you are bad, at least when it comes to her." I disconnected before she could respond. 2 days after that conversation, something arrived that would change everything, though none of us knew it at the time. The call came at 11:47 in the evening on a Wednesday. I was already in bed scrolling through emails on my phone when it rang. Grandma Opal never called this late, so I answered immediately, my heart racing. "Grandma? Is everything okay?" "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry to call so late." Her voice sounded strange. Not upset exactly, but different somehow, like she was trying not to laugh at a private joke. "I could not sleep, and I need to ask you something important." I sat up, fully alert now. "What is it? Are you feeling okay?" "I am fine physically. It is just something happened today, and I need to see you. Could you come this weekend? I know it is short notice, and you are already doing so much. I am always coming this weekend. Remember, that is our new routine because apparently I am the only family member who understands the concept of consistency." "Right. Of course. There is something I need to tell you in person. Something important." There was something in her tone I had never heard before. Not sadness or worry, but something I could not quite identify. Excitement? No, that was not quite right either. More like vindication. Are you sure you are okay? You sound different. I am better than okay, sweetheart. I just need to talk to you face to face. Can you come Friday evening instead of Saturday morning? I have some things I want to discuss with you. Of course, I will leave work early and drive out after traffic dies down. Perfect. And Ren, thank you for everything you have done for me these past few months. I do not know what I would have done without you. Her voice had this weird quality to it, like she was trying not to burst out laughing. After we disconnected, I lay awake wondering what could be so important that it could not wait until our regular weekend visit. Grandma Opal was not typically mysterious about anything. If something was wrong, she usually just said so. If something was exciting, she shared it immediately. This secretive version of her was completely new territory. Friday could not come fast enough. I left work at 3 p.m, telling my boss I had a family situation that needed attention. By 5:30, I was on the highway heading to Grandma Opal's house, my mind running through possibilities. Maybe she had decided she did want to look into assisted living. Maybe she had heard from a doctor about something concerning. Maybe the family had said something else horrible to her, and she was finally ready to cut them off completely. The drive usually took 90 minutes, but I made it in 75, my anxiety making my foot heavier on the gas pedal. When I pulled into her driveway, the first thing I noticed was that all the lights were on. Every single window glowed warmly against the early evening darkness. That was unusual. Grandma Opal was careful about electricity bills, and typically only lit the rooms she was using. The second thing I noticed was how good the house looked. The porch was swept clean. There were fresh flowers in the window boxes, and everything seemed more polished than usual, like she had been preparing for a special visitor, or like someone who had suddenly stopped worrying about the cost of home improvement. She opened the door before I could knock, and the sight of her took my breath away. She was dressed in her best blue dress, the one she usually saved for church and family photos. Her silver hair was styled. She was wearing lipstick, and there was something in her expression I had not seen in months. She looked happy, not just content or peaceful, but genuinely, radiantly happy, like someone who had just won the lottery. "There is my girl," she said, pulling me into a hug that lasted longer than usual. Come in. I have so much to tell you." I followed her into the living room, noting that she had set out her good China tea service and what looked like a full spread of my favorite cookies and cakes. This was definitely not a typical Friday evening visit. This was either a celebration or the most elaborate farewell dinner in history. "Grandma, you are making me nervous. What is going on?" She settled into her favorite armchair, still smiling that mysterious smile. "Sit down, honey. What I am about to tell you is going to sound unbelievable." I perched on the edge of the couch, studying her face. She did not look sick or worried. If anything, she looked like she was trying not to burst with excitement, like a child on Christmas morning who had been told to wait to open presents. 3 months ago, she began, I bought a lottery ticket at the grocery store. Just one ticket on a whim. I never buy lottery tickets, but something told me to try it that day. My heart sank. Oh no. Grandma Opal had fallen for one of those scams. Someone had convinced her she had won money, and now they were going to take her for everything she had. Because that is exactly what my week needed. Elderly financial abuse to add to the family drama. "Grandma," I started, but she held up a hand. "Let me finish. I checked the numbers that night, but I must have done it wrong because I thought I had not won anything, so I forgot about it. The ticket sat in my purse for 3 months. She reached into the side table drawer and pulled out an official-looking envelope, the kind that either contains very good news or very bad legal problems. Then, 2 weeks ago, I was cleaning out my purse and found the ticket. I decided to check the numbers one more time just to be sure. So I went online and looked up the winning numbers from that drawing. She paused, and in that pause I saw something in her eyes that made me reconsider my scam theory. "Ren," she said quietly. I matched all 6 numbers. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at her, processing what she had just said because surely she did not just tell me what I think she told me. All 6 numbers? She nodded, then opened the envelope and pulled out an official letter from the State Lottery Commission. The real deal, complete with official seals and legal language. I won the jackpot, honey. $347 million. The room spun. I blinked hard. Sure, I was hallucinating because there was no way my grandmother, who clips coupons and saves every penny, just told me she won more money than some small countries have in their entire treasury. $347 million. I repeated stupidly. After taxes, it is still over 200 million. I chose the lump sum. I looked around the modest living room at the carefully maintained but clearly aging furniture, at the woman who had been asking her family for help with medication costs just weeks ago, the woman who had been apologizing for needing $200 to stay alive. But you asked them for money for your prescriptions. Her expression changed then, becoming something I had never seen before. Not quite sadness, not quite anger, but something much more dangerous. Yes, she said simply. I did. And in that moment, I understood. The medication request had not been about money at all. It had been a test that her family had failed so spectacularly, it would have been funny if it were not so heartbreaking. The silence stretched between us as I stared at the Lottery Commission letter, the official seal looking impossibly real under her living room lamp. $347 million. The number was so large it felt fictional, like something from a movie about people whose problems I could never understand. A test, I said slowly, still processing. You tested them. Grandma Opal nodded, and for the first time since I had known her, she looked not like the sweet, forgiving woman who always made excuses for everyone else's bad behavior. She looked like someone who had made a calculated decision and was entirely at peace with the results. Like a chess master who just revealed checkmate. I had already won the money when I sent that message asking for help with medications, she said. I could have bought the entire pharmacy if I wanted to. But I needed to know something. What did you need to know? Who would show up for me when there was nothing to gain from it? The words hit me like a physical blow. Not because they hurt, but because they perfectly captured what I had been feeling for months. The family had spent years performing love, showing up when it looked good, when it was convenient, when there might be something in it for them. But when Grandma Opal needed actual help, actual sacrifice, actual inconvenience on their part, they had shown their true colors. And those colors were ugly. And I asked, though I already knew the answer. Only you, sweetheart. Only you showed up. That is when I started crying. Not the pretty tears you see in movies, but the ugly, overwhelming sobs that come from years of feeling like you do not belong anywhere, followed by the sudden realization that you belonged somewhere, all along. The relief was so intense it felt like drowning in reverse. Grandma Opal moved from her chair to the couch beside me, pulling me into her arms like she had when I was 4 years old and heartbroken about my mother leaving. Except this time she was the one who had orchestrated the justice. I am so proud of you, she whispered into my hair. Not because you helped me financially, but because you have a good heart. Because when someone you love needs help, you do not make excuses or look for ways around it. You just help. Revolutionary concept, right? We cried together for a long time, her tears mixing relief and vindication with years of accumulated hurt. Mine mixing joy and grief for all the time we had wasted worrying about money and feeling like we were alone in the world. So, what happens now? I finally asked, when we had both composed ourselves enough to talk. Her smile was unlike anything I had ever seen from her before. Not the patient, long-suffering smile she usually wore, but something that looked almost mischievous, like she had been planning this moment for months and was savoring every second. Now we live, she said simply. Really live. For the first time in decades, I can do whatever I want, go wherever I want, help whoever I want, without worrying about budgets or other people's opinions, or whether I am being a burden. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the small yard where she had grown vegetables for decades because fresh produce was expensive. Do you know what the first thing I am going to do is? I shook my head. I am going to take you on that trip to Scotland you used to talk about in college. The one you said you would take someday when you could afford it. The idea was so surreal, I almost laughed. Grandma, you have never even been on an airplane. Well, I suppose it is time I started trying new things. Besides, first class is supposed to be quite comfortable. First class. From the woman who used to cut open toothpaste tubes to get the last bit out. Have you ever experienced the moment when your entire understanding of reality shifts so completely that you need to sit down? That is what happened to me, as the full implications of what she was telling me sank in. My grandmother, who had clipped coupons and saved every penny for as long as I had known her, who had worked double shifts to afford my school supplies, who had been worrying about medication costs just weeks ago, was now one of the wealthiest people in our state. And she had used that wealth to conduct the most effective character test I had ever witnessed. The family group text, I said suddenly. You still have all those messages, right? Her eyes gleamed with something that looked distinctly predatory. Every single one, including Marlene's comment about how I have lived long enough and Thatcher's suggestion about assisted living facilities. And they have no idea you saw their real opinions about you. None whatsoever. They think they were having a private conversation about managing the burden of an aging mother. Little do they know, the burden just became financially independent. I thought about my mother's panicked call after I had offered to help with the medications. How worried she was that my generosity would make the rest of them look bad. How prophetic that concern had turned out to be. Are you going to tell them? I asked. Eventually, but not yet. She returned to her chair, and I could see her mind working through possibilities. First, I want to enjoy this time with you. I want to travel and laugh and stop worrying about money and people's feelings. I want to be selfish for once in my life. The word selfish sounded foreign coming from her mouth. Grandma Opal had never been selfish about anything. She had given and given and given until there was almost nothing left, and the people she had given to had repaid her kindness with callousness. The irony was beautiful in its completeness. You deserve to be selfish, I said. You have earned it. We talked until nearly 2 a.m. that night, making plans that ranged from practical to fantastical. She wanted to pay off my student loans, buy a new house with a garden big enough for all the flowers she had ever wanted to grow, donate to the local animal shelter that had always needed funding. She wanted to travel, learn new things, meet new people who did not know her as the woman who was supposed to be grateful for scraps of attention from her own children. And she wanted to make sure I was taken care of forever in a way that no one could ever undo or take away. You are going to be a very wealthy young woman, Wren, she said, as we finally prepared for bed. But more importantly, you are going to be free. Free from ever having to depend on people who do not value you. As I lay in my childhood bedroom that night, I thought about the irony of it all. The family had treated both of us like burdens, like people whose needs were inconvenient and whose feelings did not matter. Tomorrow, they would still be those same people, living their same small lives, making their same petty complaints. But we would be different. We would be free, and they would never even see it coming, because sometimes the best revenge is living well, and we were about to live very, very well indeed. The next morning, I woke up convinced I had dreamed the entire conversation. The idea that my grandmother was a lottery winner worth hundreds of millions of dollars was too surreal to be real. But when I walked into the kitchen and found her making pancakes while actually humming, something I had not heard her do in years, I knew it was true. "Good morning, millionaire," I said, testing how the words felt. She laughed, a sound so full of joy and lightness that it made my chest tight with emotion. "Good morning, sweetheart. How did you sleep?" Like someone whose entire life just changed overnight. "How are you handling all this? Are you not overwhelmed? Because if I suddenly had more money than most people see in 10 lifetimes, I would probably be having a panic attack in the corner." She flipped a pancake with practiced ease, then turned to face me. "You know what is funny? I thought I would be. I have been living with this secret for 2 weeks, and I expected to feel anxious or frightened about having so much money. But instead, I just feel relieved." Relieved? For the first time in my life, I do not have to worry about anything practical. I do not have to choose between groceries and medications. I do not have to feel guilty about wanting something nice for myself. I do not have to depend on people who clearly resent having to help me." She paused, spatula in hand. It is like someone turned off a noise I did not even realize I was hearing. She set a plate of pancakes in front of me, then sat down with her own. "I want to show you something," she said, pulling out a notebook I had never seen before. "I have been making lists." The notebook was filled with her careful handwriting, page after page of plans and ideas. Some were practical: pay off Ren's student loans, buy reliable car, set up emergency fund. Others were dreams she had apparently been harboring for decades: visit Scotland where my grandmother was born, take cooking classes in Italy, learn to paint watercolors. But it was the last section that made me emotional. The heading read, "For Ren," and underneath it was a list of everything she wanted to make possible for me. College fund for future children I might have, down payment for a house, seed money for starting my own business, money for travel, for experiences, for the kind of freedom she had never been able to give me before. "Grandma, this is too much," I said, though my voice came out choked with tears. "It is not nearly enough," she replied firmly. "You gave up your weekends to drive here and help me when you thought I needed $200 for medicine. You have been the only person in this family to treat me like I matter. This money is going to let me show you how much that means to me." We spent the morning calling lawyers and financial advisors, people who specialized in sudden wealth because apparently that is a thing that exists. Turns out when you win 9 figures in the lottery, there are entire industries built around helping you not mess it up. Who knew? By lunchtime, we had meetings scheduled for the following week to establish trust funds, update her will, and create financial structures that would protect both of us for the rest of our lives. "I have one more idea," she said as we finished eating. "What would you say to a little shopping trip?" "What kind of shopping trip?" Her eyes twinkled with mischief. "The kind where we do not look at price tags." 3 hours later, we were walking through the most expensive department store in the nearest city, and I was having an out-of-body experience. Grandma Opal, the woman who had sewn patches on my jeans because new ones were too expensive, was casually buying a handbag that cost more than I made in 2 months. "Try this on," she said, holding up a dress that probably cost more than my rent. "Grandma, I cannot. You can, and you will. We are celebrating." Her tone brooked no argument. The saleswoman clearly thought we were wasting her time until Grandma Opal handed over a black credit card I had not known she possessed. Then her attitude shifted so dramatically, it would have been funny if it were not so predictable. Suddenly, we were valued customers who deserved personal attention and complimentary champagne. "People are interesting, are they not?" Grandma Opal murmured, as the saleswoman bustled around us with newfound enthusiasm. "Amazing how much more charming you become when they realize you have money." By evening, we were exhausted, but exhilarated. The car was full of shopping bags containing clothes, jewelry, and gifts for no reason other than because we could afford them. We stopped at the fanciest restaurant in town and ordered whatever sounded good without calculating the cost. The freedom was intoxicating. "I keep waiting for someone to tell us this is all a mistake," I admitted over dessert. "It is not a mistake, honey. It is justice." That word justice resonated with something deep in my chest, because that is exactly what this felt like. Not revenge, which would have been petty, but justice. The universe had somehow rewarded the right person, and that person was using her good fortune to take care of the one family member who had taken care of her. "What do you think they would say if they could see us right now?" I asked. Grandma Opal considered this, twirling her wine glass thoughtfully. "I think they would be shocked, and then they would start calculating how they could benefit from it. Because that is what they do. They see opportunity, not people. Are you ready for that conversation? Because eventually you will have to tell them." "I have been thinking about that," she said, "and I have decided I do not owe them an explanation of when or how I became financially comfortable. I do not owe them anything at all." The finality in her voice told me she had made peace with whatever came next. The woman who had spent decades making excuses for her children's bad behavior was done protecting them from the consequences of their choices. "Besides," she added with a smile that looked almost wicked, I think I would rather let them figure it out on their own. Should be entertaining. We drove home that night with the radio playing and the windows down, feeling like teenagers who had just gotten away with something scandalous. For the first time in either of our lives, we had the resources to do whatever we wanted, and we were going to take full advantage of it. The test was over. We had passed with flying colors. Now it was time to collect our prize. Monday morning brought reality crashing back in the form of lawyer meetings and financial planning sessions. But it was a different kind of reality than I had ever experienced. One where the question was not, can we afford this? But how do we want to structure this? I took the week off work, telling my boss I had a family emergency that required my immediate attention. It was not technically a lie. Having your grandmother become a 9-figure lottery winner definitely qualified as a family emergency. Plus, I had a feeling my days of worrying about vacation time were numbered. The law office was the kind of place I had only seen in movies. Mahogany everything, leather-bound books lining the walls, and the subtle scent of expensive cologne and old money. Mr. Ashford, the estate planning attorney Grandma Opal had chosen, was exactly what you would expect from someone who specialized in managing vast fortunes. He looked like he charged more per hour than most people made in a month. "Mrs. Pemberton," he said, as we settled into chairs that probably cost more than my car. "I have reviewed the documentation you provided regarding your lottery winnings. First, let me congratulate you on your extraordinary good fortune." "Thank you," Grandma Opal replied, with the composure of someone who had been wealthy her entire life. "I would like to discuss setting up trusts and updating my will." For the next 3 hours, we worked through the details of what would become the most comprehensive estate plan I could have imagined. Grandma Opal was methodical and surprisingly knowledgeable about financial instruments, asking questions that made it clear she had been researching extensively since winning. Turns out when you have enough money to buy small countries, you develop an interest in how money works pretty quickly. The first trust was for me. $20 million that would provide annual income for the rest of my life with the principal remaining intact for any children I might have. $20 million. I had to ask him to repeat the number twice before it sank in. That is more money than I could spend if I tried to live like a movie star for the next 50 years. This structure ensures that Wren will never have to worry about money regardless of what happens with the remaining estate. Mr. Ashford explained. The remaining estate. As if $20 million was just the opening act. The second trust is for charitable giving, Grandma Opal continued. I want to establish a foundation focused on senior care and support for grandparents raising grandchildren. She was donating $50 million to causes that reflected her own experience. It was generous and personal, and exactly what I would have expected from her. But $50 million for charity still left over $100 million for other purposes. But it was the will that really drove home how completely her perspective on family had changed. I want to be very specific about who is and is not included as a beneficiary, she told Mr. Ashford. My granddaughter, Wren Pemberton, is to inherit the remainder of my estate. My daughters Corinne Hadley and Marlene Whitfield are to receive $1 each, along with a letter explaining that their treatment of me in my time of need disqualified them from further inheritance. Mr. Ashford made notes without expression, clearly accustomed to family drama in wealthy families. Though I bet most of his cases did not involve lottery winners conducting elaborate character tests. I will also need to specify that my other grandchildren, Garrison, Breyer, Thatcher, and Sutton, received nothing. They demonstrated the same lack of character as their parents. Mrs. Pemberton, Mr. Ashford said carefully, are you certain about these decisions? Family dynamics can change, and estate planning that is done during emotional periods sometimes leads to regrets later. Grandma Opal pulled out her phone and showed him the screenshots of the family group text, the same messages I had seen weeks ago. His expression shifted as he read through the dismissive responses to her request for help, particularly Marlene's comment about her having lived long enough. I am not making these decisions emotionally, Mr. Ashford. I am making them based on clear evidence of my family's character. This text thread is from when they believed I was struggling financially and needed help with basic medication costs. Their responses tell me everything I need to know about what kind of people they are. He read through the messages again, his professional mask slipping slightly into something that looked like disgust. Because even a lawyer who specializes in wealthy family dysfunction had probably never seen anything quite this heartless. I see. In that case, I will draft the will according to your specifications. However, I should warn you that excluding close family members entirely often leads to contested wills. Are you prepared for that possibility? I am, and I want everything documented thoroughly. Every conversation we have had today, every decision I have made should be recorded and preserved. I want there to be absolutely no question that I was of sound mind and acting of my own free will when I made these choices. By the end of the week, everything was official. Trust funds established, will updated and witnessed, foundation created and funded. Grandma Opal had gone from being a woman who worried about utility bills to being a woman who controlled a charitable foundation with an 8-figure endowment. How does it feel? I asked as we left the final meeting. Like I can finally breathe, she said. For the first time in my life, I have real power. Not the power that comes from guilt or obligation, but the power that comes from resources and choice. That evening, we celebrated by doing something neither of us had ever imagined possible. We booked first-class tickets to Scotland for the following month. Grandma Opal wanted to see the village where her grandmother had been born, and now she could not only afford the trip, but afford to do it in style that would make royalty jealous. Are you ready for the family to find out? I asked as we planned our itinerary. I am ready for whatever happens, she said. But Ren, I want you to prepare yourself. When they discover what they have lost, they are going to try to make us feel guilty for their own choices. They are going to claim they were misunderstood, that they really did care about me but were just handling things poorly. She was right, of course. I could already imagine the tearful phone calls, the sudden visits, the attempts to rewrite history and paint themselves as victims of some kind of miscommunication, because that is what people do when they realize their cruelty had consequences. They try to make the victims feel bad for holding them accountable. Promise me something, she continued. Promise me that no matter what they say or how much pressure they apply, you will not let them make you doubt what we both know to be true. We saw their real selves when they thought there was nothing to gain from kindness. Everything else is just performance. I promised, though I had no idea how much I would need that reminder in the weeks to come. The test was over. The results were final. Now came the reckoning. The first sign that our secret was about to be exposed came 3 weeks later, while Grandma Opal and I were having lunch at a cafe in downtown Edinburgh. We were on day 4 of our Scottish adventure, stuffed with shepherd's pie and giddy from seeing the cottage where her great-grandmother had been born, when my phone started buzzing incessantly. Someone is trying very hard to reach you, Grandma Opal observed, sipping her tea with the serenity of someone who no longer cared about other people's emergencies. I glanced at the phone. 17 missed calls from various family members, plus a stream of text messages that made my stomach drop. Because nothing ruins a peaceful afternoon, like discovering your dysfunctional family has figured out you are living better than they are. They know, I said, showing her the screen. The messages were increasingly frantic. Mom. Ren, call me immediately. We need to talk about your grandmother. Aunt Marlene. Why did no one tell us about Mom's lottery win? This is unacceptable. Cousin Thatcher, we are all coming over to discuss this situation with Grandma Opal. Where are you? Sutton. Mom is freaking out. What the hell is going on? How did they find out? Grandma Opal asked, though she did not look particularly concerned. More like mildly curious about which domino had fallen first. I scrolled through more messages until I found the answer. My cousin Sutton had posted a screenshot from what appeared to be social media. Someone had recognized Grandma Opal from a photo I had posted of us at the luxury hotel in Edinburgh and connected it to a woman they knew had recently won the lottery. Because in the age of social media, even lottery winners cannot escape having their business exposed by nosy people with too much time on their hands. Apparently someone recognized you from my social media post and remembered hearing about a local lottery winner, I said, showing her the evidence. Sutton saw the comment and put 2 and 2 together. We read through the family's increasingly panicked messages. It was fascinating to watch the progression from confusion to outrage to desperate calculation, all happening in real time across multiple text threads. Well, Grandma Opal said mildly, I suppose that settles the question of when to tell them. My phone rang. Mom's name appeared on the screen. Should I answer it? I asked. Might as well. Better to control the narrative from the beginning. She leaned back in her chair with the air of someone settling in to watch an entertaining show. I answered on speakerphone. Ren. My mother's voice was pitched higher than usual, stress evident in every syllable. Where are you? We need to talk about your grandmother immediately. Hi, Mom. I am in Scotland with Grandma Opal. We are having a lovely time. I took a deliberate sip of my tea. The weather has been beautiful. Scotland? What are you doing in Scotland? And why did no one tell us about her lottery winning? We had to find out from social media. Probably because you blocked her phone number, I said evenly. Hard to share good news when you will not take her calls. Silence. Then, that is not the point. The point is, this affects the whole family, and we should have been informed. Affects the family how exactly? Because I was genuinely curious about their logic here. Well, obviously there are decisions to be made about how to handle this much money. Financial planning, tax implications, making sure she does not get taken advantage of by scammers. The sudden concern for Grandma Opal's welfare was so transparently self-serving that I almost laughed. 3 weeks ago, these same people had suggested she did not need her medications because she had lived long enough. Now they were suddenly worried about her being taken advantage of. The irony was beautiful. Mom, she has already handled all the financial planning and tax implications. She has been working with some of the best lawyers and advisors in the state, spending more on legal fees than you make in a year. But who is counting? She has? Since when does she know about that kind of thing? Since she became worth more than the GDP of small countries, I thought. Amazing how quickly people develop financial sophistication when they have something significant to manage. She has been educating herself with professional help. It turns out she is quite capable of making her own decisions. Look, my mother continued, we are all coming over to her house this evening to discuss the situation as a family. You need to fly back immediately. Actually, no. We will be in Scotland for another week. You will have to discuss it without us. The thought of them gathered around her empty house planning their intervention was almost too perfect. Ren, this is not a request. This is a family emergency. Funny, I said. When Grandma Opal had an actual emergency and needed help with medication costs, you did not seem to think it warranted much family concern. Grandma Opal nodded approvingly from across the table. More silence. I could practically hear her scrambling for a response that did not make her sound like the callous daughter we all knew she was. That was different, she finally said. That was just a temporary cash flow issue. This is life-changing money. You are absolutely right, Mom. This is life-changing money. The question is, whose life is it going to change? After I disconnected, Grandma Opal and I sat in companionable silence, watching tourists take photos of the ancient castle across from our cafe. Are you ready for what comes next? She asked. I thought about the family members who were probably gathering at her empty house right now, full of righteous indignation about being left out of financial decisions they had never had any right to be part of in the first place. I am ready, I said. But are you? This is going to get ugly. She smiled, and there was something almost predatory about it, like a chess player who had been waiting 20 moves for this exact moment. Sweetheart, it has already been ugly. They made it ugly when they dismissed me as a burden and suggested I might not need to live much longer. Now they are going to learn that ugliness has consequences. My phone buzzed with another text from Marlene. We know you are influencing her decisions. This needs to stop. I showed Grandma Opal the message. Influencing her decisions? She repeated, shaking her head, as if I am not capable of making my own choices about my own money. Because clearly a 77-year-old woman could not possibly understand complex concepts like kindness and consequences. What do you want to do? She considered for a moment, then pulled out her own phone. I think it is time for one final test, she said, opening her contacts. Let us see how they react when they realize exactly how much they have lost. She began composing a group text message, her fingers moving with deliberate precision. I understand you are all concerned about my lottery win. Please know that I have made careful, well-considered decisions about my estate planning. Ren and I are in Scotland celebrating, and we will be happy to discuss everything when we return. In the meantime, You might want to reflect on how your response to my request for help with medication costs influenced my thinking about family and inheritance." She hit send, then put her phone away. "Now we wait," she said. The response was immediate and explosive. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree with panicked calls and increasingly desperate text messages. But we were 5,000 miles away, sipping tea in a country where none of them could reach us. Finally free to enjoy ourselves without their drama and demands. For the first time in our lives, we held all the cards, and we were going to take our time deciding how to play them. The messages that flooded our phones over the next 3 days would have been hilarious if they were not so pathetically predictable. The family had gone through what appeared to be the 5 stages of grief at warp speed, landing squarely on bargaining with a healthy side of desperation. Marlene. Mom. I think there has been a misunderstanding about our conversation regarding your medications. We were just trying to help you explore all your options. Mom. Sweetheart, you know how much we all love and respect you. Money should not change family relationships. Thatcher. Grandma Opal, I never said anything about assisted living. I was just asking if you needed help researching senior services in case you ever wanted them. It was coming from a place of love. Sutton. I think someone might be twisting our words and making us sound terrible. Can we please all sit down and clear the air? Each message was a masterpiece of revisionist history, attempting to reframe their callousness as concern and their neglect as loving support. It was like watching a group of people try to convince you that up was down and black was white, except they were too panicked to be convincing. They think we are idiots, I said, scrolling through the latest batch while we waited for our flight to London. We had decided to extend our trip, adding a few days in England before returning home to face the family circus. They think we are the same people we were a month ago, Grandma Opal corrected. People who would accept their excuses and make allowances for their behavior because we were afraid of being alone. She was right. The family's entire strategy was based on the assumption that we still needed their approval, that we were still the grandmother and granddaughter who would endure their indifference rather than risk complete rejection. They had no idea that everything had changed. We were not afraid of being alone anymore, because we had each other and the resources to build whatever kind of life we wanted. Look at this one, I said, reading from my phone. Garrison says he is devastated that there has been miscommunication in the family and wants to rebuild our relationships on a foundation of honesty and love. The hypocrisy was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Honesty and love, Grandma Opal repeated. Where was the honesty when he participated in group planning that excluded us? Where was the love when he laughed along with jokes about my age and health? The messages had evolved from confused to panicked, to angry, to pleading over the course of 72 hours. It was fascinating to watch people who had felt so comfortable dismissing us suddenly realize that their financial futures might have been tied to our goodwill. The transformation from casual cruelty to desperate niceness was almost artistic in its completeness. Mom's latest message was particularly desperate. Ren, I know I have not been the perfect mother, but I have always loved you. Please do not let money come between our family. We can work through this if we just talk. She wants to work through this, I said, showing Grandma Opal the message. I am sure she does now that there is something significant at stake. Grandma Opal's voice was dry as dust. Funny how quickly family love resurfaces when there is a fortune involved. The London leg of our trip was pure magic. We stayed at Claridge's, saw 3 West End shows, and took a private tour of Buckingham Palace. Every morning brought fresh messages from family members who were clearly spiraling as they realized we were not rushing home to soothe their feelings and fix their relationships. The desperation was palpable, even through text. But it was the message that came on our last day in London that really drove home how completely they had misunderstood the situation. Marlene sent a long text that must have taken her an hour to compose. Mom, I have been doing a lot of thinking about our family dynamics, and I realize that maybe we have not been as attentive as we should have been. I know you must feel hurt and overlooked, and I am truly sorry for my part in that. When you get home, I would love to sit down and talk about how we can all do better going forward. I have already started researching care services that might help you with daily tasks, and Thatcher and I would be happy to take turns checking on you more regularly. We are family, and family takes care of each other. I hope you can forgive us for not seeing that clearly before." I read the message aloud to Grandma Opal as we packed our suitcases. "Care services?" she repeated when I finished. "Daily tasks? Checking on me more regularly? They still think you are a burden to be managed," I realized. "Even now, knowing you have hundreds of millions of dollars. They are offering to manage your decline rather than actually include you in their lives." The audacity was breathtaking, because that is how they see older people, sweetheart. As problems to be solved, not as human beings with their own agency and desires. She folded her designer clothes carefully, each item probably worth more than Marlene's monthly salary. They cannot conceive of me as someone with power and choices. To them, I am still the elderly woman who needs their charity. The flight home gave us 12 hours to prepare for what was waiting. We knew the family would be gathered at Grandma Opal's house, probably planning some kind of intervention or emotional ambush designed to restore their access to the inheritance they had lost. "Are you nervous?" I asked as our plane began its descent. "Not nervous. Curious. I want to see if they have learned anything from this experience, or if they are just going to double down on their entitlement." She looked out the window at the city lights below. "My money is on entitlement." Based on the text messages, I suspected we already knew the answer to that question. We took a taxi straight from the airport to Grandma Opal's house, arriving at 7 in the evening to find 4 cars in the driveway. Through the front windows, we could see figures moving around inside. The family had made themselves at home in her absence. Because nothing says respect for boundaries, quite like letting yourself into someone's house to plan your financial intervention. "They have been waiting for us," Grandma Opal observed with amusement. "How nice of them to finally take an interest in spending time at my house." As we approached the front door, I could hear voices inside, multiple conversations happening at once. The sound of people who had been waiting too long and were running out of patience. Grandma Opal paused with her key in the lock. "Whatever happens in there, remember what we learned in Scotland," she said. "We are not the same people who left here 3 weeks ago. We do not owe them explanations or apologies. We owe them exactly what they gave us when we needed them. Nothing." She turned the key and pushed open the door. "Hello, everyone," she called out cheerfully. "We are home." The conversation stopped instantly. From the living room came the sound of chairs scraping and footsteps hurrying toward the foyer. They had come to collect their inheritance. They were about to learn there was nothing left to collect. The sight that greeted us in the living room would have been comical if it were not so perfectly representative of everything wrong with our family dynamics. They had arranged themselves like a tribunal. Mom and Marlene on the couch, Thatcher and Sutton in the armchairs, Garrison and Breyer standing behind them like reinforcements. The coffee table was covered with papers, printouts about financial planning, estate law, and what looked like research about lottery winnings. They had prepared for battle. Too bad they had brought water guns to a nuclear war. "There you are," Marlene said, standing up with the air of someone who had been deeply inconvenienced. "We have been waiting for hours." "We were not expecting a welcoming committee," Grandma Opal replied mildly, settling into her favorite chair with the composure of someone entering her own living room, which, let us be honest, she was. "To what do we owe this gathering?" "Mom, we need to talk about this lottery situation," my mother said, her voice taking on the tone she had used when I was 10 and had done something that required a serious conversation. "There are important decisions that need to be made, and we are concerned that you might not have all the information you need." I remained standing by the doorway, partly because there was not another seat, and partly because I wanted to observe the whole scene from a distance. The power dynamic in the room was fascinating. They clearly expected to control this conversation, but Grandma Opal's calm confidence was already throwing them off balance. "What decisions would those be?" she asked. Her voice was pleasant, but I could hear the steel underneath it. "Well, financial planning for one thing," Thatcher said, leaning forward earnestly. "This much money requires professional management, tax strategies, estate planning." He gestured to the papers on the coffee table like he was presenting evidence in court. "All of which have already been handled," Grandma Opal said. "I have been working with Ashford, Prescott and Associates for the past 3 weeks. Everything is properly structured and legally protected. The look on Thatcher's face was priceless, like someone had just told him Santa was not real. The family exchanged glances. This was clearly not the response they had expected. "Mom," Marlene said carefully, "we are just concerned that you might have been influenced in making these decisions. Winning this much money can be overwhelming, and sometimes people take advantage of older individuals who come into wealth suddenly." The implication was clear. I was the one taking advantage of her, because obviously a 77-year-old woman could not possibly make intelligent financial decisions on her own. "Are you suggesting that Wren is manipulating me?" Grandma Opal asked, her voice still pleasant but with an edge that I recognized as dangerous. "We are not suggesting anything," my mother said quickly. "We are just saying that major financial decisions should probably be discussed with the whole family." "The whole family," Grandma Opal repeated. "Interesting concept. When exactly did we become the kind of family that discusses major decisions together?" Silence, because they all knew the answer. Never. They had made decisions about holidays, gatherings, and events without consulting either of us for years. But suddenly, when there was money involved, they were all about family unity. "This is different, Mom," Marlene said. "This affects everyone." "How does it affect everyone?" The question was asked so innocently, but I could see the trap being set. More uncomfortable glances. Because the honest answer was that it affected them financially, but admitting that would mean acknowledging that their concern was not actually about her well-being. "Well, inheritance planning for one thing," Sutton said. "Making sure the money stays in the family for future generations." "I see. And what makes you think any of you would be inheriting this money?" The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. I watched as the reality of the situation began to dawn on their faces. It was like watching people realize they had been playing the wrong game entirely. "You are our mother," Marlene said, as if that explained everything. As if birthing someone guaranteed you access to their fortune decades later. "Yes, I am. I am also the woman who asked you for help with medication costs 3 weeks ago. And your response was to suggest that I might not need the medications because I had lived long enough." Garrison shifted uncomfortably. "Grandma Opal, I think there might have been some miscommunication about that conversation." "Miscommunication?" She pulled out her phone and began reading from the saved text messages. Marlene Whitfield. Honestly, at her age, how much longer does she really need these medications anyway? She has already lived longer than most people. Marlene's face went white. "That is not. I did not mean it like that." "How did you mean it then?" "Because it seems fairly clear to me. I was trying to say that maybe the medications were not as essential as you thought." Marlene was flailing now, trying to backpedal from words that could not be taken back. "Because I had lived long enough. That is not what I meant." But we all knew it was exactly what she had meant. And now she was trapped by her own cruelty. Grandma Opal continued reading from the text thread, her voice steady and matter-of-fact as she recounted each dismissive response, each suggestion that she explore other options rather than expect help from her own children. The documentation was devastating in its completeness. "Do any of you remember sending these messages?" she asked when she finished. Mumbled admissions and attempts at explanation filled the room. They remembered all right. They just had not expected to be held accountable for their words. Good. Because I have been thinking about them quite a lot over the past few weeks. You see, when I sent that message asking for help, I already had the money to pay for my medications. I already had enough money to pay for everyone's medications for the rest of their lives. The room went completely still. Completely. You could have heard a pin drop. I was testing you. All of you. I wanted to see who would show up for me when there was nothing to gain from it. Understanding dawned on their faces, followed quickly by panic. The chess game they thought they were playing had actually been over for weeks. Only Wren passed that test. Only Wren offered to help without conditions or judgment. Only Wren treated me like family when she thought I had nothing to offer in return. "Mom," my mother said desperately, "if we had known." "If you had known what? If you had known I was wealthy, you would have been kinder? If you had known there was something to gain, you would have been more generous?" Her voice was cutting now, all pretense of pleasantness gone. That was exactly what she was saying, but she could not admit it without sounding as terrible as she actually was. "We can do better," Thatcher said. "We can learn from this and be a real family going forward." "I'm sure you can," Grandma Opal agreed. "But you will be doing it without access to my money." She stood up and walked to the mantel where she kept important papers. "I have updated my will," she announced, pulling out an official-looking document. "Ren inherits everything. The rest of you get $1 each along with copies of the text messages that explain why." The explosion of voices was immediate and overlapping. "You cannot be serious. This is crazy. Mom, Ren poisoned you against us. You are making a huge mistake." But Grandma Opal remained calm, letting them rage until they exhausted themselves. She had had weeks to prepare for this moment, and their reactions were exactly what she had expected. "I am completely serious," she said, when they finally fell silent. "And my decision is final. The will has been properly executed and witnessed. Mr. Ashford assures me it is legally unbreakable. Mom, please." Marlene tried one last time. "We are your daughters." "Yes, you are. And when I needed you to act like daughters, you acted like strangers. Now, you can live with the consequences of that choice." One by one they left, some angry, some pleading, all of them finally understanding that their years of casual cruelty had cost them everything. The house fell quiet, except for the sound of car doors slamming and engines starting. When the last car pulled out of the driveway, Grandma Opal and I sat in her quiet living room, surrounded by the papers they had left scattered on the coffee table. "How do you feel?" I asked. "Free," she said simply. "For the first time in my life, completely free." And we were. Free from people who only valued us when we could benefit them. Free from the obligation to accept poor treatment because it came from family. Free to build whatever kind of life we wanted. Surrounded by people who chose to love us without conditions. The lottery had given us money, but the test had given us something more valuable. Clarity about who truly belonged in our lives. And as it turned out, we were enough for each other. More than enough. Because sometimes the best families are not the ones you are born into. They are the ones you choose. And we had chosen each other long before there was any money involved. That is a love that cannot be bought, sold, or inherited.